This is a special report from CBS News.
Good evening. This is Walter Cronkite at CBS News headquarters in New York. Well, at its beginning, this day looked as though it might be one of armed conflict between Soviet vessels and American warships on the sea lanes leading to Cuba.
While most know about the roles of John F. Kennedy, the President of the United States, and Nikita Khrushchev, the Premier of the Soviet Union, few have ever heard of a fearful but courageous man who dared not to follow procedure in order to save the world from nuclear war. The little-known but heroic actions of Vasili Arkhipov were directly responsible for giving President Kennedy and Premier Khrushchev a way out of nuclear war. This is the story about the man who saved the world by making a smart but risky decision. This would have happened if he made the wrong decision. The whole world relied on someone to save its existence from vanishing. And that someone was Vasili Arkhipov. On October 1st, 1962, 4 Russian subs, which were the B-59, B-4, B-36, and the B-130, set sail from Saida Bay, Russia, in the Black Sea to Mariel Bay, Cuba. They were ordered to complete a mission, but the men on board didn't know what their mission was. Each submarine was armed with 1 nuclear torpedo, and if the torpedo were to be launched, it would start nuclear war. The nuclear torpedo is designed to track down the target and hit it, then in seconds destroying it. The nuclear torpedo that the submarines carried had the same power as the bomb dropped on Hiroshima in World War II. As commander of the whole fleet, Vasili Arkhipov would be boarding the B-59 on this mission. By the autumn of 1962, the relationship between Moscow and Washington had broken up. The two sides had hated each other, and the Soviet Union had broken its trust with the United States. President John F. Kennedy had placed nuclear missiles in Turkey and Italy that were capable of destroying the people of Moscow in just under 16 minutes. When Olga Arkhipova, widow of Vasili Arkhipov, was asked on her opinion about the placement of the U.S. missiles, she said,
"When we found out that America had built rocket launchers against us, that wasn't a pleasant thing to know. Our country wasn't preparing for any wars. It was always everyone else who was attacking us."
Throughout 1962, the Soviets had smuggled 42 mid-range nuclear missiles into Cuba that were capable of destroying Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and New York City in just under 30 minutes. Photographic evidence was later caught and proved that there was nuclear missiles being smuggled into Cuba. The captain of the B-4 submarine said,
"If you have your missiles in Turkey, we have our missiles in Cuba." And that was the game.
Back in Russia, the submarines raised their anchors to start their journey. Each submarine was a top-secret cargo that only certain people were allowed to see. Each cargo had 1 nuclear torpedo that was capable of wiping out a whole state. The nuclear torpedo could only be launched if both the submarine's captain and political officer were both in agreement. The submarine's captain and political officer each have 1/2 of a key. That, when joined, will unlock the firing mechanism. A signal would then be transmitted to the torpedo bay. On the journey, each submarine had an envelope that says the journey destination, the orders, and their timetables. The envelope was to be opened by the captain only when they were out at sea. Under their orders, the submariners will travel 7,000 miles from the safety of the Arctic Ocean, past Scandinavia and Iceland, south into the Caribbean, where they will reinforce the secret Soviet forces in Cuba. On October 14th, the weather conditions start to change. Hurricane Ella begins to form in the Caribbean. The waves were going up to 5 to 7 meters, and the wind was making it even worse. But the B-59 sat low in the water, up to 5 meters high, and it was covered by the waves. The low cloud cover meant American spotter planes were grounded. Then on October 15th, Moscow finally made contact. They have new orders. The submarines had to hold their position in the Sargasso Sea until they got new instructions, but more time at sea meant a bigger chance of getting spotted. October 22nd, 1962, at 7 p.m., President John F. Kennedy went on a televised broadcast to the nation and said,
"But now further action is required, and it is underway, and these actions may only be the beginning. We will not prematurely or unnecessarily risk the course of worldwide nuclear war."
President John F. Kennedy also said,
Seventh and finally, I call upon Chairman Khrushchev to halt and eliminate this clandestine, reckless, and provocative threat to world peace.
On that same day, President John F. Kennedy ordered a ring of ships to surround Cuba and the Caribbean to stop any more flow of Soviet weaponry. President John F. Kennedy also increased America's defense readiness condition from DEFCON 4 to DEFCON 3 for the first time in history. Below the waters, the submarines had been away from home for 3.5 weeks. They felt isolated and abandoned by the Russian Naval Command. The radio operator of the B-59, Vadim Orlov, listened in on Miami radio stations. The ocean was naturally broken down into layers of different temperatures, and these different layers break up the speed of sonar waves, making submarines impossible to track. These layers are known as isothermal layers. On October 24, 1962, Kennedy pushed America's war readiness alert to DEFCON 2, and according to these ratings, the next stop was nuclear war. In the warm waters of the Sargasso Sea, the temperature inside the submarine went up and the air conditions stopped working. Finally, the USS Coney, one of the destroyers hunting for the submarine, makes contact with the B-59. But what the Americans didn't know was that each submarine carried one nuclear torpedo capable of destroying the whole entire Atlantic fleet. Vasili Arkhipov had to stop this action, because he knew this was an act of madness. If he had fired the nuclear missile, both sides would have reacted and fired at each other, which would have caused the end of the world eventually.